Welcome into UGA Football Live with JC Shelton, where the dogs come to talk. All right, welcome in everyone. UGA Football Live with JC Shelton, here with former Georgia Bulldog, my partner this season, Arthur Lynch. Artie, man, I hope you're doing well. I know it's been a tough weekend for Georgia faithful and a couple of Georgia alums here as well. What's your first thoughts? We'll break it. We'll do it that way. First thoughts, Georgia, Alabama there, 27-24. Very, very heartbreaking loss there for the Bulldogs in Atlanta, and Bama keeps rolling in Atlanta, man, 4-0 against Georgia there. Let's start with your first thoughts there, just kind of what it means as a whole there before we get into CFP.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a tough couple of days, right? Just trying to, process the loss. Just like the thing with Georgia, it's like there's been so many highs in the past couple of years. It's like it's been a while since we felt this kind of low. You know what I mean, as fans. But I think the first thoughts for me, we hit on it a little bit last week when we were in our pregame show with Keith Marshall talking about like how we thought the game was going to go. And I thought if Georgia came out pretty strong and like came up, started the game in a way where like, okay, we're up 10-0, we're up 14-0. I didn't think they were going to blow them out, but I was like, I think we were going to build a comfortable enough lead to where, we'd win 31-20 or 34-22 or something like that. But my biggest concern was kind of getting in a dogfight with Alabama not because we're not built for dogfights, right? I think we've proven time and time again that this football team wins big. They wins in close games. They win tough games, high pressure situations. They deliver. But I do think there's a little bit of a psyche that goes on in Atlanta specifically, right? Against this team specifically, and with Nick Saban, whether it was 2 years ago when we lost the SEC championship game, ultimately to beat Alabama in the national championship, I just think there's something to be said for Nick Saban having that kind of mental grasp in that stadium. And I don't care how good of a team that you are. Sometimes there's just kind of like, the boogeyman, right? I think that's a real thing. And there's a certain level of confidence that I'm sure Alabama has in their, within their walls and on that team, knowing that like, hey, we're 10-1 under Nick Saban in this game. Like, no matter the ranking, no matter the momentum of the past 2 years, this is still our house, right? Last time we were here, we beat them. So I knew if it was going to be a close game, it was going to be really tough for us. And at the end of the day, I don't think we played particularly bad. I just think Alabama made more plays when it mattered most, right? And so that was kind of my first takeaway. There was obviously a couple questionable calls here or there, but I just think Alabama, when they had to make plays, they made them. What do you think?
Absolutely. Just going off your last point there. I mean, you look at that game and watch it over again and just how many opportunities Georgia had. And, more times than not, they make them, especially in the last run they've been, right? I think that's definitely one thing that happened. When you look at the numbers standpoint from the game, 19-20 and first downs. So both teams are right there. Both programs were abysmal on third down. Georgia's 4 of 13. Bama was 3 of 13. Total yards, Georgia outgained Alabama, 321, 306. Yards per pass, Georgia has an edge there. Yards per rush, we're 0.3 behind Bama there. Penalties, 5 for 56, and then the turnover. I mean, you look at the penalties and the questionable calls there. I think that's definitely something to note. You're just talking about the game as a whole and why what happened, right? Especially the game of momentum right there. And then if you haven't been in the SEC championship, it's split, right? And we talked about that last week, right? That momentum you have, the crowd gets into it right there. So it even adds that factor into it. But basically the plays that Milroe made, the big ones everybody's going to remember, but it's the small ones. And I think we talked about it before. The small ones that he made were the really big ones, even that fourth down catch that likely didn't happen. It looked like it wasn't, right? But you can't change anything. Kirby Smart couldn't say anything. I know some of my friends asked me after that play, hey, why did Kirby Smart not take a timeout to give him a chance? They went hurry up. Alabama did the perfect thing there. They went hurry up. And if you're Kirby Smart, are you going to be worried about using a timeout that can come back and bite you? If you didn't see the play, right? He didn't see the play, right? And maybe he has coaches in his ears. It's a split second where he has to try to get the defense on the field, the defense set, and worry about a play that just happened, and the game's still going on. right? So I don't think you can bag him for that. I don't. But regardless, it was a bad call. So that's one thing. And then you look at the multiple penalties Georgia's way, and then reviewing a catch that was clearly a catch and not reviewing that one. It just seemed weird, And I know a lot of fans are using that as ammunition, I think, and maybe trying to point their frustrations in a certain way that way. And I'm not like that, not built that way. I don't think you are as well, Artie. I think you look at this game and Georgia got outplayed. Simple. I know it's a 3-point game. Georgia had a great chance to do something with that opportunity, the fourth quarter, to actually make a difference. But in the end, they just couldn't get over that turnover. Alabama played one of the best games they've played this season. When you look at the penalties, one of the highest penalized teams in the SEC, and you look at their turnover margin. Which the turnover margin wasn't bad coming in, but they didn't give anything to Georgia. And Georgia, in that end around play, that fumble happened on. I went back and looked at the tape. Man, we had 5 bodies out there on that left side, including a couple big offensive linemen, Ernest Green and Tate Ratledge, running at some guys right there. That play would have went 10-15 maybe. You never know what could happen.
And that's execution, right? That's on the players. Now, could we dive even deeper? Did they not rep it enough in practice? Is it on the coach? But at the end of it, that's like, and this is like this is a pro players podcast, right? I think that's pretty evident, right? But there's certain plays that need to be made, right? And I was thinking about this even more so, JC, like the past couple of days in 2011 when there was like the game of the century between LSU and Alabama, and it was like 9-6. Alabama won, and they played them twice. And obviously, this game wasn't really like that because it was 27-24. But I think it was kind of like that in a way. Like fast forward into 2023 when offense really dominates football, right? It was 2 juggernauts with an incredible amount of talent on both sides. And it was just one of those games that the team that makes more plays at the end of the game is going to win. And unfortunately for us, I think Alabama was just feeling themselves a little bit in a good way, not in a way that like where they were cocky, but they were just like, I think they were very confident, right? And look, they had some lucky calls go their way. But like even that shuffle pass, which was unbelievable by Milrow, it's like that was a great catch.
Can't do anything about that, man.
Yeah, what are you gonna do? You know what I mean? And it's just like sometimes the football gods are just not on your side. You know what I mean? And that's the vibe that I got. Like not so much in the first half. Like I went into the second half, I was like, we're about to go right down, we're about to score, and I think momentum's going to turn because we've seen it all year. And I thought it was because I think we made them punt 3 times in a row, like punt, field goal, punt, and then they scored the end. But we just couldn't really find that groove on offense, right? Yeah. And I just think that was it some coaching? Maybe. But I do think, Alabama just stepped up to the plate and played a hell of a game defensively.
Yeah. And then before I get on to Mike Bubba a little bit more too, and then that situation, I want to talk about how Alabama's defensive line and offensive line really outplayed Georgia up front. Because if you'd have gave me this stat sheet, not told me who played, what happened, and just gave it to me, I would say Alabama won this game, maybe by more than 3 points, right? Just because you look at the turnovers, the penalties, them outrushing Georgia. And usually that's a barometer for success in a football game right there, especially against 2 really good teams. That the score is probably going to be closer. And I think the offensive line, defensive line performance there and how they really were pushing Georgia around, especially early in that first half, their offensive line was. And then defensive line-wise, we couldn't find consistent space in the run game. Yeah, we broke off here and there. First drive was great. We were getting what we wanted. But consistently over the game period, we couldn't run the ball when we wanted to, when we needed to. And then offensively, when we talk about receiving and Mike Bobo, questionable calls, yes. I mean, the toss to the strong side, short side of the field multiple times when we need to just 3 or 4 yards and not putting it in Carson Beck's hands. I had some, questions about that, which I get. But is that going to lose you a game? No. I don't think it loses you the game. What lost you the game is a missed field goal and a fumble in your own territory.
Yeah.
Against the Alabama offense that was really running the ball pretty well. That's just that is a disaster. And it happened and you can't change it. Mike Bobo, when we talk about receiving core and maybe why they weren't putting the ball on Carson Beck's hand as much, Alabama was testing our receivers, and I don't know if people realize just how bad it was, but Ladd McConkey could barely move. Brock Bowers could barely move, especially at the end of the game. McConkey was, I told you yesterday, it was so surprising watching him limp off the field and come back in the next series. I thought for sure
Yeah.
he was going to be out, which, hey, incredible testament to Ladd. Wait for sticking to your guns and playing and not let them take you out as well. The thing that hurts you there is separation, speed. Alabama could play man up on you because they know you're a little hurt. You're not as fast, right? And how do you beat man coverage like that? Speed, baby. Speed and separation. And Georgia just didn't have it right there. And you had Ra
Yeah.
Thomas, who didn't play in the game. So that's another of your top receivers out. And then you had CJ Smith, Arian Smith, those guys trying to step up into that role. And Arian had a really good catch. CJ Smith was going down the sideline wide open late in that game when I think Carson threw it off to Kendall Milton for a good game, but it could have been a touchdown. How much of that was not familiarity with the young receiver and CJ Smith? Maybe he was open off his own accord and we don't know about it. But I think it's a point that you should think of, especially, and it's all over Twitter, and I tweeted it after the game about Mike Bobo and that, hey, this loss is not on the play caller, folks. I had more replies than probably any of my tweets that day because of all the straight up just Mike Bobo haters. That's how it goes. It goes always on the OC, and it's really, I'm tired of it. I'm so tired of it because that's just not, this is one of the most difficult team games ever, right? More goes into this than that one thing. And I think if it was just on Mike Bobo, it would have been worse than it was. So I hate that. It's just an easy cop out for fans. So I try to present at least the reasoning there for you to maybe not be your first frustrational point. Hey, I'm frustrated. This is where I'm going to, because I feel like that's where it comes in. What are your thoughts on that? And the people really jumping on it? I don't see it at all. Maybe they're just the haters. I'm not sure.
Yeah, look, I mean, I got a bias, right? Like, Bobo could kill a puppy, and he's still my guy. You know what I mean? So it's like I'm probably the wrong person to get I am the wrong person to get an unbiased opinion on Mike Bobo, but I I know, I know his heart, and where it lies. And that's with Georgia. And look, the proof's in the pudding. That offense got better and better each week over the course of a season. And let's be completely honest, like they didn't really have like a Pickens like wide receiver, right? Ladd McConkey and Pickens are two different beasts, right? Like McConkey was hurt for majority of the year. Brock Bowers had ankle surgery mid-season. Carson Beck, first time starting quarterback. Yeah, Kendall Milton came back at the end of the season, but like we didn't really have a premier running back. Do we have one now? Like I'm not really sure. And I love Milton, I love Edwards, but there's no Sean Moreno, there's no Todd Gurley, right? There's no like Chubb or Sony Michelle. And I'm not making excuses. I'm just saying that like offensively, this team had to play as a team all season long and pick each other up because I don't think there was one of those dudes minus Brock who, like I said, got hurt halfway through that could just be like a plug and play dominant, hey, go get me a score guy. You know what I mean? And we saw it. Brock was hurt. He was hurt. He probably came back sooner than expected. Ladd McConkey probably honestly should have taken a medical red shirt this year. Like if we're being completely honest, but I think that he saw the writing on the wall in terms of like, hey, this is Brock's year. Last year, like, we can go three-peat. Like I'm going to push my body a little bit. And again, everyone's got an excuse, right? In life, and excuses don't mean much. You got to show me the results, and I get that, but I do think there's so many external factors that went into this offense not being able to perform at its highest level, and you have to tip your hat to Alabama. To your point, that front seven was lights out. For 2 years, Alabama was like, we're going to penalize ourselves for 10 penalties, 100 yards every game. For whatever reason, they started doing that two years ago. Yesterday, they went back to like the early 2010s Alabama, like discipline, good pass protection, good run protection.
Mm-hmm.
So, like I said, I just think it was one of their days. I do think if Carson Beck stays, and we will talk about, kind of moving forward, looking forward to the end of the show. I love what I saw out of Delt. Like you could just tell that Delt was like, he's ready to take the next step. as a tight end, right? I'm not saying if you could just watch his blocking, his movement, his confidence, and I'm not talking about catching the ball. I'm just talking about his play. And I just think there's a lot of guys that are going to be coming back for this Georgia team. And I tweeted something out after the game. I was like, the beautiful thing about streaks ending, or the beautiful thing about streaks coming to an end, is it gives you an opportunity to start a new one. And I just I don't know Kirby Smart, right? I know Mike Bobo. I know what it means to play it for Georgia football. And I can just sense the hunger of these guys already to get back at it next year. And, I know Florida State kind of got screwed. Like, I get it. We could talk about that as well. But I wouldn't want to play Georgia in a bowl game because Kirby knows how to get these dudes right and knows how to get them, playing at a high level. So I'm optimistic about the future, but it definitely stings because I don't think that we were a healthy fighter going into this heavyweight match.
I think that's what definitely, it adds to the sting, like you said. And I think, you mentioned excuses there. Excuses are, to me, like, there's so many instances, like Ohio State and Marvin Harrison Jr., right?
Totally.
So it's straight up, you're blaming you allowing a 21-point comeback, I think it was, to one player on offense. That doesn't make sense. That's an excuse. What we're giving is reasonings for why we think what happened, which is something you cannot not know. I'm not seeing any excuses, and it already is not. I just want to make that clear for both of us.
I think we're going to play better, but I think there was reasons why we didn't play our best. That's not what we're saying.
Did not play our best. The mistakes we've outlined those. I'll end it with this too. Alabama they made a great, I think, coaching decision, and Nick Saban was asked about this after, so that's the only reason I know of these details. But basically, after that first drive, they changed their front seven, and they went to too high, and they weren't throwing as many defenders in the box to stop the run. They didn't have to. It ended up working out really well. So those blue chip recruits up front took it about themselves to, hey, we're not letting these dogs run on us. And they did. And that provided so many different avenues for them to create other pressures and give Carson Beck different looks. And another advantage they took is, what we said about penalties, pass interference and illegal holdings were really not called, right? Here and there. What was there, one that I can definitely remember?
Yeah, second half one, we were driving the right side of the field.
But
it was a hold.
Yeah, and Terrion Arnold, number 3, he was holding a lot of the game, and I'm sure we can go back and look at some Georgia defenders doing the same. But they weren't called, right? So they were like, and I kind of like when the officials take one or the other. We're going to call them all, we're not going to call them.
I totally agree.
I get it.
One or the other. If you're going to call everything, call everything. If you're not going to call anything, let the boys play.
Which I think, for a good standpoint, they did that, right? But, some of them obviously hurt worse than others. But Alabama, they took advantage of that situation. And then with Georgia's injuries in the receiver room, they were like, okay, and it worked out perfectly for them. But that said, I think it's a good time to move on. It definitely stings for Georgia, especially the team that, ratted off 29 in a row. Number 1 in the country for most. I mean, not the first CFP, but the rest of them. Let's get to the CFP talk here, because this is what has a lot of people up in arms, and I totally get that. Georgia, let's start with Georgia here. And it's never happened before. Moves back from number 1 to number 6 with a SEC championship loss. Mind you, the conference that has not only dominated college football, but also the CFP. No conference can even come close to the domination that SEC has had in the CFP. They moved from number 1 to number 6 with a 3-point loss to a 1-loss team in the conference championship on a neutral field. That entirely does not make sense.
Also,
right?
Not a 1-loss team that's like Auburn or like even LSU. Like, we're talking about Alabama, right? We're talking about 7-time national championship coach Nick Saban, 10-1 at like
number 1 recruiting classes. Yes.
Yeah,
we're talking about that team, and the committee literally has it in the jargon that it considers programs in their national titles or their dominance, what have you.
Yeah.
Right? I'm not going to not specific quotation marks there, but it does say that. So that's another thing that just doesn't make sense from how far they dropped. Basically, they got out of that top 4 and said, all right, who we're not going to include? Florida State and Georgia. To not piss off Florida State more, let's have them at 5. and then Georgia 6 because they knew they were going to play in a bowl game anyway. 6-5, 5-6, it doesn't matter. So I guess they just did it and didn't care. And you didn't hear any of the committee talk on the 4-hour, way too long CFP selection show and bowl game selection show. Way too long. You didn't hear anything about Georgia and if they should be mad about going to number 6. They didn't talk about that. It was Florida State, which I get it. Florida State wins the ACC, holds Louisville for the first time in like, was it 2 seasons, I think? Or this year for that Jeff Brom offense to be held under 200 yards of total offense. Very impressive defensive performance by the Seminoles, albeit with the third string quarterback who the committee just deemed not fit enough. They're a different team. They're not good enough to be in the top 4. And there's so many ways you can take that. But what we saw was, of course, Alabama in there with Texas, Michigan, and Washington. Michigan and Washington they were sitting pretty, baby. They didn't even have watch parties, right? They couldn't have. They did. But they shouldn't have. They were in. Mm-hmm. So they were like, okay, Alabama, Texas. They had to put them both in because they wanted the SEC in because Alabama and Georgia and SEC championship. How could you not include at least one of them? Alabama just has that one loss. Texas won the Big 12. They were like, okay, if we let Alabama in, we have to let Texas in. If we let Texas in without just the win over Alabama and the Alabama still wins the SEC championship, we have to let them in. My big concern, and I'll throw it to you now, Artie, is in which we won't even face this concern next year, I guess. But like I said, that number 13 team next year and number 14 team next year, what have you, they're always going to have issues. Always going to have issues with this. But I think it'll be less. But what I'm saying is you can either have the best 4 teams or the most deserving. Can't have both. And they put in both. They use a little bit of both. It's like by team basis. They're like, all right, we're using the eye test for this team, like Oregon, which I was on the Oregon train too.
Same. We both were.
Loud wrong. Your boy's loud wrong right here. They use the eye test for Oregon, most deserving for Michigan and Washington, right? The best for Alabama, Texas is what it seems like to me. And I just don't think you can be that inconsistent and with so much at stake. But I'll tell you right now, I wouldn't pay to be on that committee.
The thing that irks me, and look, I was not high on FSU, right? I underestimated their defense. Their defense is legit. It's elite defense. But I have been vocal on this podcast in particular about my thoughts on FSU because I think so little of the ACC. I just think like collectively as a conference, they don't have the athletes that certainly not the SEC has, but even like the Big 12, the Pac-12 or Big 10, I just think they have less, like across the conference. I think there's more Vanderbilts than there are Clemsons, right? Or more Vanderbilts than there are Georgia, or not Georgia. You get what I'm saying, right? And I think collectively, you go out through the season, and I've talked to coaches who I've played for or played with, who have coached and played or in one of the other conferences, and they say, and I quote, in the ACC, you can show up and not play your best and get away with one. In the SEC, if you show up and not play your best, you're getting embarrassed. So I hate when there's a comparison, right, off like records or this and that. The one thing that does irk me about the rankings, and I actually think, I'm not saying the committee got it right, but I do think that Florida State being left out of the 4 best teams is okay. What I don't necessarily understand is, let's say Georgia won, and it was Georgia 1, Michigan 2, Washington still won 3.
Florida State would have been in.
Yeah, would Florida State in?
Yeah.
Like,
yes, I think so, dude.
You know what I mean? So it's like and I'm not, and Texas is a good team, but like they put themselves in like a box, and the committee did, being like, well, we have to let Texas in because they beat this Alabama team like 3 years ago. What it seems like that was the second game of the season.
Oh, man.
And I'm not. And Texas very well may be better than they were week 2, but like but that doesn't mean that they should just jump Florida State, right? And I do think Texas is a better team, so I'm not advocating that they got it wrong. I'm advocating the logic that goes behind it because I
Mm-hmm.
think they were like, how do we tiptoe this situation? And it's like, if Georgia wins, there's no way Texas is the top four, even though those two events are not correlated,
Yeah.
right? And that's what irks me a little bit. Um,
Yeah, I think
because
they
I
could
just
even. I'm
go
sorry.
ahead.
I think they
No,
could
no,
have
no.
even set themselves up for better success. And when I mean better success, as everybody's going to have a problem with it, or a lot of people, I should say, not everybody. Everybody has a problem with it right now. I think they could have maybe lessened that a bit by, if you're going to penalize Florida State for losing Jordan Travis, then after you lose him, drop them back.
Drop them back to 8.
Drop them back and then let them play into it, maybe, right?
100%.
But they decided then, even
They
after
moved
they
him
won
up.
the ACC championship. Oh man, that just yeah.
I didn't. We talked about it there. I was like, why are they 4? Right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, we talked
And
about. I
again,
remember that
like
now.
I was like, it just didn't. Like the movement of Florida State, like because at that point you're toying with them, right? Because when you have them at 4 without Jordan Travis, you're telling them and the rest of the world you control your own destiny. If you win out, you're in. It doesn't matter how you win, right? You
Yeah.
just got to win. And then all of a sudden you're like, wait, we won 2 more games without him and we dropped 1? Like, that doesn't make any sense.
No.
Now, again, I'm in agreement that Alabama and Texas are better teams than Florida State, right? And until we move to a 12-team playoff, which I am excited for, some people are not. I am. I think more college football is better. I'd rather watch a 3 versus 12 matchup than the mayonnaise bowl. That means nothing, right? That's just my personal opinion. But man, I didn't get that. I was like, so Texas is in, but Texas is only in because Alabama won.
No. And
But
you're
then
hitting
Georgia,
it. I'm
yeah, go
sorry. I'm
ahead.
sorry. You're hitting it
No, no,
right there as well. And that's what I meant by you can't have it best and most deserving, because
totally.
everybody in their right mind that doesn't live in Washington would say Georgia would beat Washington, maybe
Beat the
considerably. I
beat
don't
the
want to even
piss
just
out of them.
probably, right? But I'm going
Beat
to
the piss
say,
out of them.
I'm just going to say beat them for now.
No, I think they beat the
Right?
piss out of
If it's
them.
the 4 best, then Washington wouldn't be up there. Georgia,
No
the
doubt.
Georgia Bulldogs will be preparing for a CFP game, right?
Mm-hmm.
But because
Totally.
you did a little bit of both with Michigan, Washington, and then added Texas and Alabama as the best part, that's what I think has created such a just crap storm of, like, you can point out 15 different ways that anybody in the right mind could have decided, hey, this is probably the better move than what happened. And I think you said it there as well. They set themselves up for this, I think, throughout the rankings.
Totally.
And then you
And I
have,
just
yeah,
go ahead.
yeah, go ahead. You're good.
No, and I just think that, like, look, it's and again, this is a moot point because this problem is going to be it's already in the past, right? Like, this is the last year of 4 teams, but the problem's not going to go away because we're now, there's going to be automatic bids, which I think is good. I think automatic bids need to be a thing in a tournament and that's what these things are. It's an invitational tournament, right? Um, and some of those bids are like earned, right? Like, you win a conference championship, you're getting a bid, and then some are going to be at large, which I think are a little bit more subjective. But man, like, I was thinking about it, I was like, to put Georgia 6, it just, I don't know, it just didn't really make sense. You know what I mean? Because I was
Yeah.
like, okay, you're putting Texas at 4, but you're putting Florida State ahead of Georgia. Like, you've already bumped them out, so just like, Georgia's not a worse. Georgia is not a worse team than Florida State, right? And so it's like, treat Florida State how you believe they should be treated, which 7, 8, 9, or 10, not 5. Because if you
Yeah.
wanted them that high, you'd put them in the top 4.
Exactly. Exactly. And now, like you said, next year is going to be different. Everybody's going to have a problem with, oh, we had this, we deserve home field advantage for this and such. Well,
Yep.
we didn't get ranked in the top 4 this time. But you talk about the automatic bids and such, so I think that'll help at least with that top 4, because they're going to get the bye. So it'll be really interesting next year.
So
Georgia could
top
have made
4
it.
gets by.
Top 4 get your bye. Mm-hmm.
Interesting. I thought it was top 2.
Yeah, get ready for the SEC playoff. It looks like. That's what it's all coming down to, folks, I believe. But so what's next for Georgia? Florida State, unfortunately. And honestly, I don't, setting aside my love for football, which I'll watch any football game I can, and being a Georgia alum, the Bulldogs are number one there for me. But this matchup just screams I don't want to be there.
Yeah.
Every which way, even worse than years past. You've had those games. Maybe your Heisman quarterback's going to the NFL. He's not going to play in it, such like that. But not only do you have a Georgia team who's done what it's done the last 2 years and is one of the best teams in the country, I think it's safe to say that. Even though I read previously, just before I got on with you, already, Heather Dinich, ESPN, gave her report of kind of the inside of the committee. She had her sources there and talked to them. And she wrote, Georgia was not unequivocally one of the best 4 teams in the country per the committee. So they sat there.
Was not or was?
The committee sat there and said they're not unequivocally one of the best teams in the country, one of the 4 best teams in the country, which is very interesting. What I would go back to is, hey, let's make this committee up of former coaches and players, people who have been around the game, know what they're looking at, not ADs and other folks who are not even ADs. It's bureaucracy. Of course it is, because what do you have linked to this, Artie? And it's follow the money, baby. We got TV money. We got 100%. ESPN TV money, right? And that has to, because you can't look at it the other way of this. I'm not going to get into politics, but you know how government works. You do very well. Money creates issues, creates just people are not held to a certain standard. They get away with things. Bad stuff happens. Power also, that comes along with power as well. So I don't think you can look at this and say, oh, these are angels in here that are doing the right decision and making their best judgment. I don't think as a whole you can look at anything in life and think that doesn't work that way. So I don't know. I don't know how we get away from a committee, but I'd love to. Let's go over to BCS and let the BCS do the 12 team, baby.
No, man, I think you're right. I think honestly, I think you go and you get like Tyrone Willingham, right? Or David Shaw. You get not current coaches, but maybe or maybe even like a 1AA coach like Murphy, right, from Harvard, who's won a bunch of games, like, or a D3 coach, and like you get Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Troy Aikman, right? Like people who understand the game but are prominent, who people respect. And be like, okay, let's get a group of 12 and let's collectively come together and pick. But I'm with you. Like these 8, there's just way too much. There's the term or the phrase I'm looking for is conflict of interest when you're talking about athletic directors and presidents, because their bottom line, and this is a newsflash to people who think that an AD is just an educator and a president is just an educator. Those guys, they are like a chief investment officer at a hedge fund. They are constantly trying to raise money because they need to build the new business school, build the new football facility, gain new research labs because they want Rhodes Scholars and this and that. And this, it's all about money, right? JC's right. When you have the people who are in charge of raising money and generating revenue for the school, picking the people in the playoff game that have no idea what goes into getting into the position to play in a playoff game, that is a little bit, it's sketchy. And the conflict of interest is there. So I'm with you. I think particularly as this expands, I think they need more football minds in the room and less academics.
Dude, of course. I mean, that's like, and we could put it this way. Myself, having not played a snap of college football in my life, to become an AD one day and be on this committee, picking one of the biggest sports in America behind the NFL, right? Picking players' lives, players' parents' lives, coaches' lives, their programs, their job security, everything is on the line here. Beyond, and you could sit here and name 50 other things, and I would be in charge as one person and a very small group of people to make big decisions like that, not knowing the game, right? That's a huge part, man, because you can always fall back on, well, they're just not a better team if the guys who are telling you that pull out the numbers, pull out their takes, well thought out, know what they're talking about, and give it to you. Much more receptive myself to that than like we talked about the ADs and such and presidents in this committee making decisions like they think they're on a football field, or they sat and coached a team to a winning record, such like that. I mean, that's what you have those guys out there. Go get them. I don't know. I digress.
Put Jim Tressel on there. He's a college president, but at least he knows ball, right?
Mm-hmm.
Still can't believe they fired him for free tattoos, but I mean, like, it is what it is.
Yeah, that's interesting when you think of that Michigan situation too, and that's another thing. And I will get off the CFP in a minute, but FSU gets out. Michigan is number one unequivocally. No one questions it, and they're sitting there just getting their head coach back.
It's pretty bad. Like, me, I think Michigan's a pretty good football team, but I'm just like, so that's a perfect representation of the collective ADHD that we have as a society. It's like we can only stay focused on one thing for so long. It's like I watched CBS this morning, their morning show every morning, and they're like leading with the FSU thing, and I'm like, and I was just thinking to myself, I was like, Michigan's number one and like favored to win the national championship, I guess, or maybe not, but either way, it's like no one is talking about that whole thing, right? We've already moved on. You know what I mean?
Oh, we'll be talking about it whenever that report comes out, and if Michigan wins a national title, which I don't think they will, having to play Alabama, which
no, I think Alabama's going to win it again.
I think I'd take Alabama. I'd take Alabama.
The irony is, I think it's going to be either 3 or 4 that wins it, which are like the people that are like neither of those teams should be in, right? Like, but I think
the best, right? There was the best we talked about, and that's who everybody's taking. It's not Michigan or Washington, unless you wear
no
big
one's
blue
taking Washington.
No, and I get it. I mean, I get it. But what I was getting at too is, where was I getting at? Oh, I know. Eli Drinkwitz, Missouri.
Did you see that? You're bringing this up,
dude. Ohio, which awesome. I'm excited. Probably one of my favorite matchups to watch is going to be Missouri and Ohio State. Now, it's not like we have the two teams that they're strongest battling it out. Of course, Kyle McCord, Ohio State quarterbacks, entered the transfer portal. They didn't have much of a QB leg there to stand on anyway, and now he's gone. That's going to be very, very hurtful for the Buckeyes, because you have a Missouri team that is playing for one of their biggest games in program's history, right? How many times have they made a New Year's Six? I'm not sure, but this is one of them, and this is coming off one of their most surprising seasons in program history. Top 10, going to play Ohio State, right? Who's just right there in the Big Ten. You win Michigan and you're in the playoff. So you get that chance to really put their program on the map, recruiting, all those different trickle-down effects that this game could have. And Eli Drinkwitz is on ESPN after finding out the news who he's going to play in Ryan Day. And during the interview, he says, wait, hold on. I'm getting a call. I think it's Connor Stallions. I love that. He's a goofball.
I saw that. I started laughing, and I was just like, it just gave you some insight, because all these coaches talk, because we talk about money, right? All these coaches, they are part of like 1 or 2 agencies, right? So when all these contracts come and buyouts, they're all negotiated by 1 or 2 like the sports agencies, right? So that they all talk, that they're all, not all of them, some of them probably hate each other. They probably definitely all hate Harbaugh, but like, that he and Ryan Day are like probably tight. And I would just love to see the text chain of Eli Duritz and Ryan Day and whoever else is like their buddy offensive mind group text. Because I bet you Chip Kelly's in there. I bet you it's just like a bunch of shit talking. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I love that, but it's a good opportunity. I'm excited for that game. Next for Georgia, so Florida State here in the Orange Bowl. Get back to that. We kind of get off on these tangents, but there's a lot to break down, so I'm not mad about it. But if you're staying with us here, Georgia, Florida State, in a game that I don't think anybody wants to be there. Florida State, they should have their backup quarterback back in. I know he missed the ACC championship due to concussion. I'm assuming he's going to be back and playing. And when you talk about this game, it is December 30th or December 29th. It's the 29th. No,
it's the Orange Bowl. Bowl, right?
My bad. Yeah. December 30th, 4 p.m.
Orange
Hard
Bowl?
Rock Stadium. Yeah. In Miami. Hard Rock Stadium, home of the Dolphins. Georgia,
Uh-huh.
the last time they played in that game, they killed Michigan in the Orange Bowl to go to the the CFP National Championship, beat Alabama. I think a big thing to consider is what Georgia will show up with in this game. And with that, we'll go to transfer portal news. 6 Bulldogs have entered the portal, 5 of them today. He had offensive tackle Austin Blask, missed most of the season due to injury. He did earn that starting left tackle job preseason, but injuries, he just couldn't get back on the field, and Ernest Green took that over. So he's out as well. Brock Vandegrift, quarterback, our backup, former 5-star recruit, Prince Avenue guy, Bogart, Georgia native, which is right there outside of Athens. So he is in the portal. I've heard a likely destination is Kentucky, and it's pretty well reported. So I'm assuming that's going to take place.
Kentucky, huh?
Yeah, which I think would be a good fit for that offense. There's a lot to be seen there for him because we haven't seen him much, but definitely has talent. And I like his resolve as well, sticking in, trying to see, what happened with Carson Beck and such. But with that, it kind of means that Carson Beck is really considering staying. Be surprised if he doesn't now. I think another year would really put him into that top first round discussion.
Yeah,
beyond
top 10.
beyond just your late first round, early second. So it might just make more sense for him. And having the coaching staff that he does, along with the talent, I think that's a good move for him. He'll be able to play on the national stage again, gonna contend for a CFP title again. So I like that move for him. Also, defensive end CJ Madden, redshirt freshman, he's gone as well. Also, defensive lineman Jonathan Jefferson, he's a redshirt sophomore, I believe, is gone as well. And I think, and wide receiver Jackson Meeks as well. So he is gone as well. He's a reserve player. Played in a lot of games for Georgia, mostly special teams and such, but he's gone as well. So you have those guys going to be missing. So really just hurts you depth-wise. Gunnar Stockton's going to have to move in there for backup quarterback in case something happens with Beck, who I believe is playing in that game. We haven't heard. This is just based off the news we have right now. So it could change by the time you're watching or listening to this. We could have another 5 players into the portal. This is just recorded on Monday. This is the first day of the portal window, lasts for 30 days. So make sure to check back. UGAwire.com, playerslounge.io. We'll have your information there if you want to get a checkup on that. But who will Georgia show up with here? You're going to have some opt-outs of this game as well, beyond just transfer guys. When Georgia played Cincinnati in 2020, he had 6 opt-outs in that game. I look back. So you're going to have some more of those. I think injury related is definitely going to happen, right? We talked about the injuries versus Alabama, and those are going to be nagging. They're not something that just goes away in 30 days, I don't think, Artie. So Lad McConkey, Brock Bowers, I'm assuming he's going to opt out just for the NFL draft. But, again, we don't know that for sure. And then defensively, look at Javon Bullard as one of those guys, Kamari Lassiter, one of those guys, maybe even a Warren Brinson. Middle linebacker, I think you should be safe. Ismail Mondon is projected as one of the top linebackers, so I could see him opting out as well. Jamon Dumas-Johnson, obviously broken forearm. I don't think he'll be back. So you're going to show up with a shell of a Georgia team, basically. And there's some good things that come with this and some bad things, right? I mean, the execution, and Artie, you could talk about this. The execution might not be in the level that we've seen. They're going to have to play with some guys who are not used to playing in certain spots, and they're going to have a pretty large stage to do it, although it's not a CFP game, but it is a big bowl game, and it's going to be in front of a great crowd in a pretty fun city to watch a football game in Miami. I just don't see how Georgia comes in this game feeling great about itself with all these freshmen guys who have played mostly special teams trying to step into this role. Be interesting. I'm really interested to see what Kirby Smart does here, what his coaching move is, Artie. Maybe you could talk about that. How would you get these guys ready to go for this game and get these young guys in and ready to step up?
Yeah, well, I think 2 things, right? I think first, great programs and coaches understand that the reason why becoming bowl eligible is such a big deal is not because you get a couple extra gifts and coaches get a little bit of bonuses. Like those things are all like material things that are cool, particularly if you're a young kid or you're a coach and this and that. It's really because it's the second season. It's like a whole spring ball, right? Like there's really no rules like by the NCAA. Like you can have like almost like a camp like scenario. You can make the days longer. you can have longer meetings because you're no longer in with school. And I'm giving you some backdrop for all this. It's like for those younger players, particularly in this transfer portal era and this era where guys sit out in the bowl games, like there are so many young guys that are right on the cusp of becoming major contributors, right? Going from starting special teams or like, a couple reps at nickel here or a couple short yardage reps at tight ends here to being like, okay, next year I'm going to be like a real contributor or a starter. And for them to develop as a player for the next 3 weeks in these bowl practices, it's huge, right? I came from Massachusetts. I had a ton of natural gifts, but I did not have a high football IQ or like a real developed football mind, or like my movements weren't really like up to par as say like Aaron or Orson, who came from Plant, which was like a powerhouse in Florida, right? But being able to go in those bowl games, right, and really like almost do like a preseason camp or a spring ball type environment, it's huge for young players. And I think to your point, like how does Kirby handle this? Kirby's a competitor, right? To a point where it's like he's like a sociopathic competitor, right? I think he is going to stress competition from now until the game. I think the older guys who are definitely coming back or who might be seniors that are going to play are not going to get a ton of reps. They're probably going to do like walk through stuff. They're probably going to be like, hey, this is the game plan. We still want to win this game, but we're going to get the young guys reps, right? Our 11 on 11 period is going to be second, third, and fourth string scholarship guys, and they're going to be banging on each other and they're going to be hitting each other because these are the next crop of dudes that we need to develop. So next year we can restart this streak and go win a national championship. So I think really for the coaches' sake, they're looking at this 3 week period of, okay, we have an opportunity to develop our young guys, rest our guys that need rest, and anyone that's going to be opting out, they're opting out. They've made their decision, right? And one thing that Kirby does an incredible job of, and what he's done the past couple of years, is he's created a culture of competition and developing players and pushing each other as a collective group. And so I actually think it's you're going to see a lot of young guys probably step up in this game, and it's because I think of the atmosphere that Kirby has created and will have be able to see this thing through. And then I think that's very, very important for a young team because ultimately we've got 6 guys leaving, we've got a couple guys opting out, and a bunch going to the NFL. And this time right now is going to be incredibly important for those young guys to get reps and develop or further develop and then roll into the spring after hopefully an Orange Bowl win.
Yeah, no, I second that sentiment too about Kirby Smart. I think there's a lot of coaches that we would expect maybe a significant drop off when losing such players and maybe your competitiveness and in a tight game in the fourth quarter, how are you playing? Right? Do you lay down? Maybe they're running the ball well on you. Do you lay down? Do you fight back? Go get a score and win the game? Stuff like that. I think you'd expect that from Kirby Smart team, at least in this game. It was similar to that Cincinnati game. You had a Cincinnati team that was really going on a big run there with Ritter. They had NFL pros all over. It was a huge moment for their program. They were a tough team, right? And Georgia showed up with the shell of their team and still put a great game together and ended up winning with some lesser guys who we came to love over the last couple of years now from watching play. And that was kind of their intro moment for a few of them.
What happened the next year?
Good things.
Right? That's what I'm saying, though.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I think, and that comes down to coaching. Like, there's so much talent on that roster, right? There's guys that we know their names from recruiting profiles, but we don't know, like, they're going to be first round picks, but you have to develop them, right? Mm-hmm. It's what Texas A&M couldn't do, right? They got the blue chip guys that couldn't develop them, right? Yeah. And I think Kirby has proven now, and his coaching staff has proven now that they can develop these guys. And this is going to be a key moment. Now, it's kind of a crapshoot because it's a tough opponent, great defense. We don't know who's playing, who's not. But I do think it's an opportunity that Kirby sees is like, okay, I'm pissed off. I just lost to my rival. I need to go win a national championship next year, and I need to beat Alabama on the way. And the only way we can do that is by starting right now.
Exactly, because you got Alabama and Texas on the schedule. You got two CFP teams. One of them,
Mm-hmm.
Artie and I think, is going to win this game. Win this CFP, probably
Yeah,
Alabama. But you have a chance to really make a statement during the regular season next year, which we really didn't have this season. We didn't have that
totally.
big, huge statement opponent. Yeah, we played Missouri and Ole Miss at the end of the season, but this is going to be right in the heat of the schedule, man. It's going to be a great time. Back to this bowl game here. I think you made a great point there with the younger players and seeing them, and just building off of that. I mean, you have coaching staff wise, you're missing Fran Brand now. He's going to go ahead and go to Syracuse to start. I think if Georgia would have won, beat Alabama, he still would have done both. But it's a situation where you have him gone now, so your DB's coach. Fortunately for Georgia, if you're thinking about just this game, you have Will Muschamp and Kirby Smart back there, two of the best defensive backs coach widely considered in college football. They're going to be fine. Interesting thing to note, though, is whether they bring somebody in between now and this game or after. I don't think it's a big deal, but it's interesting to see what they'll do there still, to me. And then transfer portal as well, even in speaking to it, adding some guys like I did there. You have some really big-time players in the portal right now, and this is just the first day. And I think one glaring thing already is for this Georgia team, just knowing the depth we have and knowing the upperclassmen in this defensive line room right now, I think you lose several. And we didn't have that one power hitter this year anyway. It was more by committee. Georgia does have a great freshman defensive line class coming in, but we haven't seen guys, unless you're Jalen Carter, come in and play as a freshman meaningful snaps. As far as for Georgia
difficult
goes,
to do.
You see it other ways, but you have Trey Scott there. Georgia defensive line coach is really good. Look at the NFL prospects and the guys he's, like you said, already there, really built into NFL players, 3-star guys, development. But I think there's options in the portal, and Walter Nolan is one of them. I've seen every fan base about saying he's coming to theirs. I think he stays in the SEC. Former 5-star prospect, the number 1 prospect in that infamous Texas A&M recruiting class by Jimbo Fisher, one of the best in the SEC, probably in the country. You get him in, and a guy like that to kind of build your room around, I think would be really good. And it's crazy to think we're talking about college football already like it's NFL free agency, and that's what it's become.
Well, it's to that point, right? So this morning, after I saw the Kyle McCord news, I was surprised because I didn't think Kyle McCord was bad. I mean, he wasn't C.J. Stroud, but C.J. Stroud's an NFL Rookie of the Year.
And he's young, first-year starter.
Yeah, I thought he was a good player, and I was like, I was like, that's kind of odd. Like, he's going, and then I saw Dylan Gabriel, which I thought was odd, and I'm like, those two dudes are ballers. You know what I mean? And so I texted our group text, and obviously, for some context, right? In college, I lived in a house of 4 other football players. My best friends to this day, Dustin Royston, now a college football coach at Mid Tennessee, fullback for Georgia. Aaron Murray needs no introduction. Christian Robinson, linebacker coach for Baylor, and then me and Ty Fricks, who were just kind of the observing fans. But I was like, question for the football bros. I was like, do these QBs enter the portal just to test the waters for NIL money? And I referenced the Gabriel and McCord, and Christian, who's a coach who kind of sees it differently, he was like, I think they do, right? It shows that it kind of allows them to be like, hey, I'm for sale, but I might come back. So at a place like OU, it's kind of like I'm testing the free agent market, right? Which is pretty interesting because it's like, I think OU and OSU have money. And then Aaron, and he made his tweet public, he was like, I bet you McCord had a sit-down meeting with Ohio State, was like, hey, you can stay, but we're probably going to look elsewhere for a solution. And so I think this is kind of the balance of power we're now seeing. Players get an opportunity to make serious money if they're in the positions like, a guy like Dylan Gabriel or McCord are in. But, there's 2 sides to that coin, right? If you don't perform up to the standards that Ohio State thinks you should be performing, they'll show you the door. And, it's a very interesting point that you made about free agency. So I think both of those guys are in free agency for very different reasons.
Yeah. And
one's getting cut, the other's looking like I'm shopping for that money. Does that make sense?
And beyond just McCord and Ohio State too, which I think you can obviously tell that coaching staff unlike a lot of America wanted to admit, that offense wasn't half of what it should have been. But I think Oklahoma-wise, Jeff Lebby going to Mississippi State, and then Gabriel, who transferred there to be, I guess, with Lebby in that offense. That's what it seems like now because they're both gone. But, especially with Oklahoma coming to the SEC next year, if I'm Dylan Gabriel and things are okay there, I'm staying because I get to play in the SEC.
That's
right?
what I said.
And you get to play after a season, which he just had, which he was one of the best statistically quarterbacks in the country, and did a lot of good stuff and beat Texas.
When they beat Texas, they were talking about him as a Heisman.
Yeah, so that's very interesting, and we'll never know fully. We'll get some rumors here and there, but it's just a whirlwind, man. What's our third year of NIL now? Third season, I think.
Third season, yeah.
So we're only just learning what goes into this. We're learning covering it. I know I am. What not to take, facts versus rumors and stuff like that. But it's very interesting, and I expect Georgia to add some depth here at defensive line and receiver at least, maybe some corner as well. Georgia,
I think running back too is another one that we might be looking at.
Running back as well. Thank you for adding that too. I meant to say that as well. Running back, because you have some guys who fought injuries there in Andrew Paul, Branson Robinson's been out. Andrew Paul just finally got his feet back this season after tearing his ACL preseason last year. Branson, I think, can be that guy, but how does he play after an injury like that? You don't really see many patellas like that he went under. So, what does that mean for running back and stuff?
We missed having a premier back. We did, right? And I love what Edwards did and what Milton ended up doing towards the end of the year, but Georgia's got to have we got to have a Clydesdale, man. It's like we've had one throughout our program's history. Even when we're not very good, we've had them. Mm-hmm. And you just need that guy that's like, hey, things aren't going well this game in the air. Let's just run this thing 30 times. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that there's not guys on roster who can be that. You mentioned Robinson as one, but that was noticeable this year, I thought.
Yeah. So you're gonna have that committee of Roderick Robinson, Branson, and Andrew Paul at least in the room, mm-hmm. and then some quality recruits coming in, but not that hard hitter. That at least what we know of right now. I think Georgia and Kirby Smart really goes to the portal more than they ever have this year, and I think you just think about the injuries, man. Like what held this Georgia back team more than anything, football wise? It was injuries. Unfortunately, that's part of the game, right? And Georgia recruits at the best in the country, and they still weren't able to provide guys who could really at least carry the torch at least in the big time moments, which we saw as Alabama, especially in the wide receiver and defensive line.
Yeah, totally. And you see Florida State, I know I'm not super high on them, but that team is largely from transfers, mm-hmm. right? And it can be done, right? I'm not saying that you need to, go fire everyone on the roster and go get 80 new guys, but if there's a need, it's okay to dip into the pool of transfer guys and fill that need. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's what Georgia did last year well with Ra and Dominic mm-hmm. Lovett. While they might not have gotten up to speed enough to really make a huge difference for us when we needed it, who's not to say they come back and have great seasons next year. I think what kind of gets in here and Georgia fans need to consider is Kirby Smart talks about it a lot, and throughout the NIL portions of these few seasons, is he's focusing right now on getting guys in he can develop. He's still a recruiter. But
he loves it, man.
But he says what we do is we find the guys that we think could help us immediately. I think that's what he's referring to. And that's what we saw with Ra and Dominic. They were in the top of the position group from the start of the season. So I think those guys are definitely out there, and Georgia needs some help in some areas. So something to consider, and we're in for a whirlwind the next month, with this stuff. This was just the first day. I'm writing my fingers off. So check back. We're going to take a week off. Next week won't be here, but we'll be back to preview Georgia, Florida State, and talk all things balls. I'm sure we'll have a lot more transfer portal news and such, and some rumors to go over as well. But in the meantime, UGA Wire, part of USA Today. That is a good way to keep up with some transfer portal news, as well as at playerslounge.io. UJ Football Live on Twitter. I'm at JC Shelton _ Arthur Lynch is always at ALynch1788. Artie, I appreciate you jumping on. Maybe one of our less energetic shows, least energetic shows of the year. But
hey, man, you got to show up to work, man. You got to even the days you want to show up to work. But I love it. Hey, I've enjoyed this season. I hope we got a couple more shows, so we'll hit it. But as always, you're a friend and a quasi colleague, I guess now. But yeah, man, it's been fun. I'm excited. I always love to talk college football, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, it was great to have you on this season because I've been solo, you know, and it's a
Mm-hmm.
little bit more work, pulling things out of me that you would pull out of me without me having to think about them, if that makes sense, right? Kind of
Yeah,
work
man,
off each
I'm
other, which
happy to
I
do
love.
it.
I love it. I think our viewers has really appreciated that as well from what I've heard. So with that, I'll leave you guys. We'll be back soon. But until then, go Dogs, Artie.
Go Dogs. Talk soon.